Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we will be talking about this absolutely colossal winter storm that is currently beginning to move in across the western United States. Now this thing is truly going to be a cross-country system. It's going to go coast to coast with its impacts. It's again going to be pretty slow moving for a system of its size. So the impacts are going to be exaggerated because of that. So I'll be going over essentially who will get impacted, what impacts will people be seeing, either the rain, maybe some severe weather, maybe some heavy snow, and what the pattern will be bringing kind of following that system and what to expect. And there will be some big changes following this system, so don't want to don't want to leave anyone out so they get caught off guard. All right, let's start talking about the system before I get too carried away there. Okay, so notice that right now we start off by looking at the GFS model. So this model is one of the better ones. I use equally as much as a European. It's one that goes out a bit further than a European, and I would say in recent years it's probably caught up to the European model in terms of its accuracy. And notice that it shows this system right here already moving in the next 12 hours. So here's the time, November 7th, 12 a.m. that you can look at. So depending on your time zone, this is assuming the Central Standard time zone. So if you live across the east, you add an hour. If you live across the west coast, you subtract 2 hours, and if you live across the mountain zone, you subtract 1 hour. So notice that by early Monday, late tomorrow, this thing's already well on its way through the western United States. And this may look like if it's already progressing pretty quickly, but in fact it's gonna kind of come in two surges of moisture. So notice that's one. It kind of meanders a bit towards the north, so Washington, Idaho, Montana. And this is why this system is so impactful. It's going to be not only impacting one part of the western United States or even Canada. It's going to be impacting pretty much from border to border across the U.S. and also southwestern Canada. So a lot of snow, additional snow for these areas. Notice again, this is where we start seeing some precipitation develop across maybe the Canadian prairies, maybe into the northern plains of the United States. But that's not the main storm. And you can see what we start seeing is another surge of moisture, kind of like the second piece to this system. And this is the one we really have to keep our eyes on. While this is all going on, we have a very strong pressure out across eastern Canada, southeastern Canada. We also have very strong southerly winds helped by this high pressure pumping moist air from the south. So all this exaggeration of time because of this two-part system. So again, typically during a quicker moving system, we would see this thing move in let's say again Monday, Sunday, like this one, and already be out in the plains probably by Tuesday. But because of how slow this is, the atmosphere just continues pumping moisture and recovering anything that was lost with the cold front that the prior system brought, the one that brought all that severe weather, right? So the atmosphere is going to recover. We're going to be seeing very warm temperatures yet again across the plains and the southern United States. And here is that main system that we're watching for. Notice with this one, the surge of moisture is a lot more significant across portions of California. We are seeing snowfall rates across the Sierra Nevadas that are approaching probably several inches per hour. And notice that as this one moves also pretty slowly, but it's finally the one that pumps itself out into the plains. And again, at this point, the environment is just very primed. You can see showers developing far ahead out of it. And as I put this forward into Utah, Colorado, we see a very strong, again, band of snow moving through. Again, you can see that there's a lot of moving pieces, so I kind of struggle trying to give you an exact, precise timing of this thing. But notice that by Tuesday and into late Tuesday, early Wednesday, this thing is fully in, the second piece of it, fully in, made a landfall across the United States, and it's moving through the west. Now, this thing's done. By the time, if you live across California, Nevada, the Northwest, this thing's out of here by late Wednesday, early Thursday for you. But it's just beginning across the plains and the front range of the Rockies. So notice, cities like Denver, Cheyenne, Scottsbluff, into Nebraska. So all those frontier cities, if you will, in the frontier of the Rockies, they will be beginning to see the storm move in. Notice the pressure, 997, it's pretty high, but it begins deepening. It begins growing pretty quickly. Again, a lot of showers, storms, the warm front starts developing pretty quickly as we have a lot of this warm air continuously being pumped up towards the northern United States. So again, this system has a lot of ideal environmental conditions working for it. And at first, first, you can see we do have a little bit of ice that develops across portions of South Dakota. That is definitely something to watch for. Obviously, folks up here know how to drive in the ice and snow, but the first one of the season and just ice in general is a little bit tricky. So that's definitely something that we'll have to watch for. And notice this system quickly intensifies. So we are just look at the coloration of that moisture. You can see it's a lot darker, indicating very heavy snowfall rates. So there will be locations here, especially across South Dakota, to start off with a little bit of ice and then transition over into some potentially very heavy snowfall. So that could be, a bit tricky as well. If you have ice on the roads, it gets covered by snow. You may not see it. Definitely something to watch for as well. Notice the cold front isn't too impressive. That's why the severe weather side of this will be limited. But further up north with the warm front across Minnesota, Wisconsin, there definitely still could be some powerful thunderstorms. Maybe not severe, but just, claps of thunder and downpours of heavy rain. Notice this thing really begins and continues intensifying, I should say, 988. So at this point, it's a sizable system. Very strong winds on the backside of this, which leads me to believe that this may be a blizzard across the Dakotas. I mean, this is Blizzard Alley, so this is where they occur. And looking at this from a meteorological standpoint, this is just classic, right? Here we have the cold front, here you have the warm front, and the giant comet shape of snow on the backside. So this is just a stereotypical, powerful, classic kind of plains late fall storm. And yes, this thing is definitely not quick moving. Notice that by late Thursday, early Friday, this thing is continuing to intensify. So again, at this point we are at Friday, so the system will be pretty much taking shape across this whole week. It does begin weakening. You can see that the moisture that from the south originally helped it intensify kind of gets cut off. We also see a lot of cold air being pumped in behind this, and that's going to be the big change for a lot of folks here, even if you're not directly impacted by this, right? So Illinois, Indiana, you're not going to be seeing much rain out of this. Many other states as well, but you're going to see the cold air after this. And notice that once it starts weakening Friday, a lot of these areas end up quickly wrapping up the snowfall. And even if it moves into cities like St. Cloud, Minneapolis, which I believe there could be a brief few hour window that they do see some snow, it's going to be lighter, and it shouldn't be too significant. And what we do see is, again, that cold air surging pretty far towards the south because of how strong these winds are behind this low pressure. Another thing to notice, obviously, this catches everyone's attention, that rapid surge of moisture. I didn't point this out on purpose, but do note that there will most likely be some sort of a tropical system impacting potentially Florida. Now, for the exact details, if you live across Florida and you want to know, the strength of this thing, go to your local National Hurricane Center. They will have the best information on that. But regardless of what it exactly does, it's going to have a lot of moisture with it. And notice that it meanders around the southeast, pretty slow moving, right? I'm definitely concerned before landfall how strong this thing is, but it quickly weakens. However, as this system moves forward, this blizzard, what we do see is that it catches up kind of this moisture surge along its cold front. And you can see that it quickly sweeps this up towards the north and east, developing some pretty heavy rainfall rates across these areas. So the northeast could get impacted by this with a very, very heavy rain event. Something that we'll definitely have to watch for some flooding, especially across the coastal areas. Definitely some strong winds as well. Good thing is, a lot of these areas are relatively dry. They have been in a drought through most of the fall and kind of late summer months, so this is definitely something that probably won't cause as much flooding as it typically would have. But again, if you have several rounds of storms, one after the other, no matter how dry you are, you will be seeing some problems with drainage and whatnot, especially in the fall when leaves could be covering sewers and whatnot. Notice this thing, it does move out though, and eventually a week from today, precisely, this thing is going to be gone, right? So all its impacts in terms of the precip are going to be moving away. But what we do see is cold air, and that's the thing that the other systems haven't brought. And this thing will be pretty expansive. Notice what we can indicate, or how we could kind of indicate that right off the bat, is a lake effect. Cold air over warm waters, relatively warm waters, create some lake effect, and there could be some nasty band storming, maybe even some really good fetches potentially for cities like Buffalo and whatnot, maybe off of Lake Erie as well. So Lake Ontario. So we'll have to watch that as well. But that's gonna definitely impact a lot more people indirectly, right? Kind of the cold air brought by this system. And then the pattern does seem to quiet down. So notice that as I push this forward, we do see some models trying to paint some sort of a system here that's still far out. But it's gonna be definitely not as chaotic, which is good because this pattern's definitely been intense. We saw storm after storm after storm, and this is kind of like the grand finale. I mean, according to the GFS, really ridiculous ridiculous intensification with that system. So let's just bring this through, end it right there, and next Sunday, and show you some of these rainfall amounts. Well, rain and snow amounts. Just the snow is converted to rain equivalency. I'll show you the snow in just a second. But look at all this precip across the west, the northern plains. Notice how there really isn't much across the central United States. That's going to be interesting with the system. Its cold front's not going to be really stretching out far down to the south. It's going to be kind of cut off from that. Do note across the northeast again, especially the coastal areas, could get quite a bit of rain, potentially 2 to 4, maybe even some isolated amounts of 5 inches of rain. Now, if we were to take a look at the snowfall amounts, clearly you can see the west gets hammered. There are going to be amounts across the Sierras that the National Weather Service is calling for up to 5 feet of snow. So, a very extreme snowstorm, no matter what time of the year it is, especially this early on. And then you can see that for the Wasatch, the Bitterroots, the Colorado Rockies, a bit of a more average snowstorm, not as extreme, still a powerful one, and there will be amounts potentially, well over a foot, maybe even 2 feet. Across the plains, this thing will also be legendary if the GFS is correct with how it develops, and I do believe the GFS is pretty accurate with this because it has consistency within itself. It's been showing this for a few days, and the European model, which is kind of, I guess, the GFS's rival or friend, in this case also agrees with it. So, the confidence is thankfully decently high, so it makes forecasting this system a bit easier. Again, the exact track, maybe this could shift 100 miles to the south, to the north, yes, but, you won't be seeing this snow way up here across southern Canada. That type of track shift most likely, won't be happening here. Do note the pockets of up to 2 feet of snow, not out of the question. But for now, I would say anywhere from a foot to a foot and a half, with, obviously many other areas getting anywhere from 6 to 12, and maybe in cities like St. Paul, St. Cloud, Minneapolis, whatnot, La Crosse, getting a few inches of snow from that kind of backside of this. And obviously, if the lake effect were to turn on, you could see there will be many areas that could see quite some significant lake effect. So that is that. I do want to also show you the cold air after this. So out ahead of this system, of course, like with all these storms we've had, it's going to be very warm. Notice across the north, though, pretty much as warm as it is across the south, it's as cold to the north, where it goes up, it goes down. So it's always kind of an equilibrium type thing. And yeah, I mean, look at that. So portions of Nebraska, the southeastern sections could be 20, 25 degrees above average, and then the panhandle will be 20, 25 degrees below average. So quite an extreme contrast if you were to be driving through that state, for example, on this given day on Thursday. So yes, you can see that warm air does get swooped out of there by that cold front, and that cool air comes in. So not only has the plains and the rest of the United States, quite frankly, been dealing with the warmer pattern, so, even transitioning to a more average pattern would feel cooler, but we're transitioning to just a downright very cold pattern. And some of these temperatures, especially with such a strong snowpack across the north, will be chilly. You can see many areas, I mean, my area hasn't even gotten below 35, and we'll be just seeing straight lower 20s, maybe even teens for a good while. This pattern, this cold air seems to be rather reinforced several times, so it doesn't, obviously there could be some brief moderation, but still a cooler than normal pattern. And yeah, a complete turnaround. I mean, definitely something that if you're a winter lover or cold lover, you will like. And whether or not there's going to be some snowstorms that come along with this, we'll have to wait and see. The models are indicating some slight indications of that, but it's still a little bit too early. Notice in the far range, what happens is a bit of a mystery, but I would say that around the week to week and a half following this system, it definitely will get cooler. Now let me show you briefly the European model. Again, it's in very, very good agreement with the GFS. And notice there's that system, that first wave moving in. Really, right now, it's already beginning to move in across the, again, United States and Canada. This first one will focus more towards the north as it hits the prairies of Canada, Montana, Colorado, or especially Wyoming, a little bit of in Colorado, Utah. And then that second wave, which doesn't look too impressive until it gets closer, and you can see dumps even more moisture. And this is the one that brings a lot more heavier snow towards Utah, Nevada, more snow for Wyoming and Montana and Colorado. And it picks up a little bit of speed here, but it also quickly starts intensifying again. Could be some pretty heavy rain here across Minnesota, South Dakota, and we're watching for the ice threat, as that could also be a pretty intense area, or a freezing rain or sleet for. You could see certain areas, especially maybe the arrowhead of Minnesota, depending on where this exactly sets up the track of the system, could be dealing with a prolonged period of maybe even 6 to 12 hours of some decently heavy icing. So that's definitely something to watch for. And even though the cold front isn't long and super impressive, it will be closer towards the system, pretty strong. Right here near the area of circulation. So we will have to be watching for some of these areas, maybe getting an enhanced or slight risk of severe weather there. But again, the European, similar to the GFS, really intensifies the system quickly. You can see a lot of very heavy snow indications right there, and it does begin weakening though pretty quickly, though also very strong winds. Would not be surprised if blizzard warnings are issued with that. And notice the European also shows that tropical system of some sort. If you recall, yesterday the European wasn't really too sure about this, and the GFS was the one that was showing that, and it turns out that the GFS was the one that was correct, and you can see the European kind of followed it in its tracks. Again, it's weaker, but the main thing remains the same. It's going to bring a lot of moisture, and you can see that gets scooped up by that system, and the European really shows some pretty impressive rains potentially across the northeast. Again, depending on how far inland this thing is allowed to go. That depends on the arrival of that cold front as well. Notice as this thing moves through, again, southeastern Canada, northeast, mainly rain for the large metros, but further up north, also some pretty heavy snow. And, you can see a secondary kind of low pressure there develops from that tropical system, and that could also bring some pretty nasty winds. European, just like the GFS, shows very, very chilly air moving in behind this. Also, the lake effect fetches seem to be set up just maybe not as effectively as the GFS is showing, right? But similar to the GFS, the European keeps it cold. You can see it doesn't just go away quickly. And we do see another system that moves in towards the west, but it's weaker, and potentially it could develop some sort of a system further towards the south, and maybe it could also be some sort of a snowy system. We'll have to wait and see, though. You could see the European is showing that, but pretty cold towards the north. If I were to show you the temperatures here in that last frame, you could see a lot of these areas would be chilly, especially where that snowpack is. Definitely negative Fahrenheit if that were to occur. But even for the rest of the United States, 30s, 40s, definitely probably the chillier, most chilliest, time frame we've seen in a while. There was that period in early October, mid-October-ish, if you guys recall, that was very cold. It was like that cold blast. It brought a lot of freezes and frost, and then it warmed up quite a bit, and now it seems to be cooling back down. So that is that. That's basically what I wanted to show you from the main models. I do also want to show you the Canadian. The Canadian is the third model that I kind of use. I say kind of because it's not too accurate, as accurate, I should say, as the other two models. And if you recall from yesterday's video, this model has been keeping, again, pretty much everything in agreement with the European and GFS up until the west coast. You can see it shows a lot of that precipitation, but what it does differently is that it shows this system just not intensifying really whatsoever, and it keeps it, it shows a storm, just nothing too incredible. Shows a little bit more of that snow maybe further towards the south, also just more broad, more widespread, and so the impacts won't be as significant for the plains. Still shows a lot of cold air behind it, and it still shows that tropical storm right there, and that merging of those two. You can see though it more kind of successfully merges the two together versus the European and GFS, which kind of show two distinct systems kind of being swooped together. So that's interesting. Either way, still pretty heavy rain for the northeast with the Canadian scenario, and you can see it shows quite a bit of cold air, probably exaggerating some of this cold air, as I don't think, some of these anomalies I'll show you here just are a bit too extreme, and you can see, yeah, some of these colorations here would be indicating some very, very cold temperatures, which I don't really think will be the case. There will be cold, but not just that cold. But again, we'll have to wait and see. I may be wrong about this, but often the Canadian, if it's an outlier from the GFS and European, and those two agree, it usually isn't in the right, and it doesn't usually end up being right. But again, that's based off historical past. So, National Weather Service now. This is the Weather Ready Nation map showing you an area of the United States, all of the United States, not southern Canada, unfortunately, with all the watches, warnings, and advisories. Notice the west is lit up. There aren't any watches up across the northern plains yet. It's still a little bit away. I'm sure, though, in the next few days, if this, the models keep consistent, there will be warnings and watches issued here. Notice, yeah, a lot of Northern California is in this extreme zone for this heavy snow, and let me just exemplify that to you by clicking on, let's say, just probably an area that's going to see an absurd amount of snow, the Central Sierra. Yeah, you can see, so starting already today around an inch, then during the night, 6 to 10, 10 to 16, 6 to 10, 11 to 17, 9 to 13. You have pretty legendary amounts of snow, and there could be areas that, reach up to 5 feet. So you can see total snow, 1 to 4 feet, with local amounts up to 5 feet, wind gusts as high as 45 to 55. So yeah, definitely an incredible storm for these mountainous areas, as this kind of comes in two parts. And as I mentioned, the first part of this thing is already moving in. And let me just show you this using this radar here that I have, my local radar, my local weather station. And you can see we have that first band of, again, pretty intense rain already and snow moving into Northern California and Oregon, and this will continue sliding through the south. And then on Tuesday, we see that second part moving in. And elsewhere, we're still kind of seeing the remnants of that previous system moving away. So yeah, a lot of systems here at play and at work. But yeah, you know, this pattern remains active. Thankfully, no severe weather is forecast for the next few days, though again, I would not be surprised to see some severe weather flaring up Thursday and Friday further up towards the north where that system really intensifies. Alright, that's basically it for today's video, guys. I just wanted to show you a brief rundown of the system. Again, the models are still relatively in good agreement with this storm occurring. You can see that the GFS, this is model, the first model I showed you, obviously that's the most latest run of the GFS, but the one from noon, you can see, so it's been consistent, right? It showed also a similarly very intense storm, quick intensification, actually quite a bit of confidence with the system relatively being so far out. And you can see, if anything, the trend has been towards a more robust system, as yesterday at midnight, you can see it was a bit more, it was also obviously very impressive and intense, but a bit weaker. And yeah, just weakened a bit quicker, and you can see with the most latest model run, it's a lot more broad, a lot more expansive, and well, not a lot, but just the difference is there. And obviously some of these winds would be incredibly strong, so that leads me to believe that this could be a blizzard, not just a winter storm. And if I were to show you some of these 10 millibar or 10 meter winds, so pretty much surface winds, you could see that we have a lot of those yellows, maybe even some darker yellows there. So that indicates winds, you know, 32 knots per hour. So in terms of mileage, that's a bit higher, closer to 40, and that would be kind of the sustained winds. So with a blizzard, you need 35 and miles per hour at least, with snow either falling or blowing, and in this case I think the criteria will be met, but we'll have to wait and see. Again, definitely we'll just have to wait and see for that. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next episode. See ya. Bye.